Throughout the ages, there have been spirits too strong to conform to the will of their times. These souls go through life misunderstood and rejected by the societies to which they belong. If they're too far ahead of their time or unbalanced in their energies, they may well be viewed as insane. If they're blessed with eloquence, they might occupy the social function of the preacher or the poet, of the visionary or the prophet. Growing up Roman Catholic, I rejected everything the church presented to me. The stories were too unlikely and the church pews too uncomfortable. Maybe Jesus was real, but all that faith stuff was for moms and the goody two-shoes in Sunday school. But in the evolution of my own seeker's journey, I've come to realize that I've thrown the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. I believe the human moments of the Bible, from the mystical ramblings of the mentally suspect prophets to the wilderness trials of the Messiah, and onward to the trials and revelations from the Roman Catholic saints and some of civilization's greatest reformers, think Martin Luther, all the way to John Lennon. I believe that these examples offer life models for the potentiality of the human soul. I believe that the spirit can be so strong as to assert its will in the material plane, using the human organism to give it a voice. In my conversation with today's guest, Grizz, we briefly discussed the alignment of the egoic self with the soul. This process might be called self-realization, or alternatively, being saved, or a spiritual awakening. The language used to describe this inner shift will vary between cultures, but it is a process available to all men and women called to seek it. This is a process alluded to in the scriptures. It's a process described in the Yoga Sutras and the teachings of the Buddha. This is a process latent in our biology, yet seemingly transcending our personal self. I believe this universal message has been stifled in the contemporary interpretations of the Bible, a failure that has led our Judeo-Christian society astray. The comparative mythologist Joseph Campbell once said, "It used to be that stories were in the minds of people. When the story is in your mind, then you see its relevance to something happening in your own life." He goes on to say of the loss of such stories that we don't have comparable literature to take their place. These bits of information from ancient times, which have to do with the themes that have supported human life, built civilizations, and informed religions over the millennia, have to do with deep inner problems, inner mysteries, inner thresholds of passage. And if you don't know what the guide signs are along the way, you have to work it out for yourself. Today's guest, Grizz, has explored these inner mysteries. The spiritual instruction he'd received in his Mormon upbringing failed him. So he explored the inner mysteries and thresholds to passage using solitude, the wilderness, and psychedelic exploration. He has had to discover his own guide signs and work it out for himself along the way. He has found and is living his truth. He is a free thinker, his prejudices and assumptions unshackled from the bonds and dictates of this culture. His frame of reference is so far removed from the day-to-day American consciousness that at times his stance on a topic may baffle you. Yet it's precisely his unwavering conviction that I find most intriguing. Stanislav and Christina Grof, in the introduction to their book, Spiritual Emergency, When Personal Transformation Becomes a Crisis, wrote, "All ancient and pre-industrial cultures placed high value on non-ordinary states of consciousness as an important means of learning about the hidden aspects of the world and of connecting with the spiritual dimensions of existence." I'm not attempting to attribute any mystical prowess to Grizz's persona nor glorify his words, but I do believe that any initiate listening to this conversation will catch glimpses of a deep earth wisdom mixed within his storytelling and lively speculation. It is in this spirit of discovery that I embarked on this podcast. I suspect that Grizz's perspective on many of the topics covered in today's conversation are more natural than those of our culture, and I hope that some of his ideas and stories can help serve as guide signs for any seekers listening to this conversation. This talk took place in Grizz's art studio, overlooking his homestead property in the hills of Northern California. Tabletop and sitting space was littered with turtle shells, furs, and tubes of acrylic paint. Canvases in various stages of completion lined the space that he'd built himself. I apologize for the uneven audio. I'll be more mindful of the microphone positioning in future episodes. I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with one of the freest spirits I've ever met. Thank you for listening, and enjoy. So what does the term walkabout mean to you?
Walkabout?
Yeah, I know it has like Aboriginal context.
Yeah, it definitely stems from that culture. It's, for me, a walkabout is it's a journey down that red road, and it's a time of self-introspection, just a time to get your thoughts together, your mind together. I mean, it's the intentions of the person on walkabout, but usually what provokes a walkabout is something going on in a person's life where they need to get their head right, and what better place to do it than in the wilderness, you know?
Out in the wilderness where you can kind of be what we evolved
just
to be.
The energy of humanity is not present, you know? It's not humming. You can actually listen to the earth and the earth's spin, you know? But
so you went on walkabout after...
Well, I've gone on walkabout several times in my life. The first major one would probably be, the moment we were just talking about where I was deemed AWOL by my XO and just caught my ex-wife with another man, totaled my vehicle, fell asleep at the wheel, you know, and didn't have any way of getting to my drill unit. And I was a reservist at the time, so it wasn't, in my mind, that big of a deal. Right. But my XO, you know, pulled his rank and told me I would be there.
Right.
And I told him I'm sorry you made that decision, and told my ex that I was not happy and I was done, and grabbed my belongings and hitchhiked up Provo Canyon. Got picked up by a old rancher from Wyoming who's heading back there. And
what belongings did you have with you?
I had my military bivvy, my Gore-Tex bivvy, my sleeping bag, ground pad, a few MREs, you know, a change of weather gear, some, you know, pretty much my camis, my cold weather gear.
Like a knife and all that shit?
Yeah, I had a knife, a little buck knife, with a skinning hook, and I just pretty much the normal stuff you'd have when you go camping, you know. Didn't even know I was going on a walkabout at that time, you know. I just needed to get my head straight. And after telling him kind of where I was in my life, and he seemed to know a good trail that would put me off in the right direction, and after stopping by a store and getting I got some dried rice and beans. Well, no, I had dehydrated beans, big bag of dehydrated beans, and a few canned, you know, some protein, some tuna at the time, and not nearly enough of what I was. Like I said, I didn't know what I was doing.
Just get your head right.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, at the time I was just going.
Mental health.
Yeah. At the time I was like, you know,
clear.
Thinking maybe a couple days, 3 days. You know, I was an Eagle Scout, so to me, camping for a week was no big deal, but
that was your domain.
Yeah, so, I went out there and he dropped me off at the trailhead and we said our goodbyes and I, heading on down the path. Beautiful, beautiful area out there in the Uintah Mountains as he dropped me off. And
did anyone know you were out there? Any family or friends? No,
at the time I didn't. I said, it was just moving. I just went and did it. But my family was used to that from me. My mom always told me I was born 200 years too late, and they got used to not hearing from me because right before that, I was actually working in wilderness programs for troubled youth. That was one of my civilian jobs while as a reservist. So I worked for a few different wilderness programs at the time. Kind of got let go from a couple of them, or just not. I was too real with the kids, You'd be out there working with these troubled kids that just reminded me of my peers, and I, some of these kids I was only a couple years older than, you know what I mean? So I'm just, but I'm in the position of, I'm like kind of big brother, and I was just taught not to lie, to tell the truth. And when a kid who's experiencing things of this world and getting in trouble, the only advice they want to hear is that of someone who's been through it. I know I was that way, my whole life people are, oh, you shouldn't smoke pot. I'm like, have you ever smoked pot? And they're like, no. And I was like, then shut up. You don't know what it's like.
You know what it is.
Yeah. So, it's the same thing. And if I'm out there in this wilderness program to touch and change the lives of these kids, I mean, how am I supposed to do that when I can't be real with them?
Right.
And so I was real with these kids, and I taught them, basic survival skills, fire by friction, cordage, just the basics. They had to do their curriculum out there. We did a lot of astronomy and things like that, how to navigate. There's, sundial sticks and all kinds of stuff, and they were into that, but they had to do their schooling as well, and their curriculum. And, so it wasn't all survival stuff, but they really liked that. And, a lot of these kids, they'd start doing their little war stories, talking about, their egos, no, the drugs they've done, and, just what got them in trouble. And, the program didn't condone that, didn't feel like it was good for people's recovery, it could just reverse the whole changing, and then they could start glorifying the, the bad boy syndrome. But a lot of times they'd ask, or we'd try to interrupt the conversation and be like, tell them not to, and it always came out of their mouth. You guys ever done it? They'd question our knowledge and experience, and I'm not going to have nobody do that to me. They'll question what I know and what I've seen.
Right.
And I pretty much told every kid who ever asked me, I said, they're probably in a thing out there. I can't say that now because, shoot, man, it seems like there's so many synthetic drugs out there. I'm lost on that whole world nowadays, but
new acronyms coming out all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Just emojis. They probably got emoji drugs out there. I don't know. But I'd tell them, I said, there's probably not any drug out there that I haven't tried. But the problem, with me, I've never been a chemically dependent person.
Right.
Prudence is very big on my list, and listening to my body and how I feel, and that's kind of why I've probably always stuck with the natural substances and stuff, and stayed away from all the chemicals and the man-made things, even though acid was probably one of the best man-made drugs out there, I'd say.
And we've been talking about that previously, so that's
for sure
definitely a shaper.
So yeah, I mean, being real with these kids, they'd open up to me, and I could get these kids. I mean, these are kids that some of them just assume stab you in your face while you're sleeping than to listen to you. But because of the rapport that I built with them, you giving them firm discipline and you're giving them love, which is going to create a relationship, which is going to create change. And the funny thing about that is that was the program that I worked for. That was their main philosophy. But yet I got in trouble for doing it because of the politics. So these kids would come around. I mean, I'd get these kids with survival packs, made out of their sleeping bag and a tarp and some cordelette wrapped, with some seatbelt straps. And some of these packs are heavy because these kids collect junk while they're out there for 60 days and get sentimental to it. And we'd be on like a hike to our destination, and that's another thing we always said was a destination's a place, it's not a time. So we have a place we're going, and you guys can take your time and sit down and pout about how long and your feet hurting and da 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 da. But we're going to get to destination when we get there. It could be 2 a.m, it could be 4 p.m. You know what I mean? So
sounds great.
It's up to you guys. We never would indulge future information. Oh, hey, camp's just 100 yards down there. And one time I had them sit for like 4 hours. You know what I mean? Trying to pull a rebellion. Like, we're not moving any farther. And we're like, all right. And we sat there and we took turns. The staff slept, but we took turns banging pots and pans, keeping them up, annoying them, singing retarded songs. Yeah, ridiculous songs. I don't know if retarded is politically correct these days, but
don't let them get comfortable.
Yeah, just keep them on their feet and on their, not letting them get away with anarchy,
their
basically. And that time it was funny because finally it was, I think it was probably about 5:30. Started seeing like daylight coming over the ridge, you know what I mean? And finally the kid that started to sit down was like, all right, let's just do this, Probably plus or minus a few cuss words, and like, all right, woke the staff up. They packed their sleep bags up real quick and literally walked 100 yards. All right, guys, put your bivy line, which is what we call their sleeping bag row. They'd all have to sleep in a line. They'd make their sleeping bags up into like a tarp burrito, And
sounds like basic training a little bit.
Kind of, We tried to keep some structure in there, but they were so pissed after that. They're like, "Are you serious? This was camp?" I was like, "Yep." And you guys got to get up in about an hour and a half, so I suggest you get some sleep, And they never sat down on another walk. That group did, but just we try not to make up consequences. I'm a big believer in natural consequences. It's a good way for people to learn. Just natural consequences are just consequences that aren't contrived by, whatever motive, the person making it's got. I'm not gonna, like for instance, a natural consequence for them is if you can't every night, in order for them to eat a hot meal, they have to produce an ember from their fire kit. If you don't produce an ember, you don't get to eat hot. You have to eat cold food. That's a natural consequence, because in the wild, if you didn't catch a fire, you're not cooking your food, or catch a fire. If you didn't start a fire, you're not cooking your food, so, just natural consequences like that. But the problem started getting in with the kids, where I started getting them, I'll get off track here, but why I ended up getting relieved of these jobs. I mean, it got to the point where I could have these kids double timing. I did treat it like a boot camp. I was like their drill instructor, and they loved it. And the other staff didn't understand how I had this authority over these thugs, essentially. A lot of these kids were sent by court, you know what I mean? Like, you're either going to jail or you're going to the wilderness for 60 days, you know what I mean? Every once in a while, there's some, rich kids who probably got caught smoking pot, and their parents are like shitty parents and don't have time to spend with their kids. Is the logistics of all troubled youth that I dealt with. They have a graduation, we'd meet their parents.
Just absent.
85% of the time it comes from their parents. Because their parents aren't being parents. You know what I mean? Because our society programmed us to think that both parents needed to work because they wanted double taxes and, make women feel like they were being held back and held down by having womenly responsibilities, staying at home and all that crap, So
that's part of the
that was where it started, and it started moving it out. And next thing you know, we've got undisciplined children who have no fucking, guidance at home. Like I said, when I was a kid, I was the baby. So by the time I was a teenager, I was an only kid. My kids, both my parents were working. I got from the time I got off school till about 6, 7 o'clock for my mom to get home, and then 10 o'clock for my dad because he'd go and teach night school at night. I had all those hours to do drugs.
Yeah. To experiment with your consciousness.
Yeah.
And to, explore.
Well, it's a good thing that I had good parents, you know what I mean, who raised me properly with true principles to where I was able to make conscious decisions while doing socially unacceptable things. Right. You know what I'm saying? But when you don't have that guidance and you don't have those true principles, you got people doing drugs and breaking into cars or, you know what I mean? So it wasn't, I don't feel like me doing drugs was the bad part of it. Other people, especially when in the Marines, getting my clearance checks and stuff, and they try to push buttons by talking about family and things, and they considered my parents very horrible parents because where were they when I was doing all this stuff? Right. I mean, dude, they could have been home, and I would have just said, I'm going to a friend's house, and I would have went up into the woods and smoked my pot. Right. You know what I mean? People just don't understand. But anyways, getting back to troubled youth, they didn't respect the other staff. And they didn't respect the other staff because the other staff was lying to them. These staff members were following policy. You know what I mean? Which means they had to lie and not be real. Right. Is what that says to me. You know what I mean? It's like trying to buy insurance. Right. And they won't sell it to you because you're out of your zip code. And you're like, wait, I thought State Farm is State Farm. We're in the state of California. You know what I mean? I'm trying to give you $700 so I can drive home from buying my truck with insurance. But you're not selling it to me because you're reading the computer screen that's telling you, red flag, he don't have a local zip code. So they told me to drive up here and buy insurance from my local insurance broker, and I'm like, wait a second, so you're telling me to break the law because you can't push F7 and delete that screen and think for a human being? I was like, don't you make a commission off of insurance? She's like, yeah. And I was like, so you're basically allowing a computer to queer you out of bringing food home to your babies. You know what I mean? I was like, this consciousness is lost today. It's like everybody's got to look at that screen and they can't think. There's nothing sacred. There's no personal interaction. Right. Everybody's a number. Everybody, gets treated the same.
There's just a lot of people on the planet right now.
Apparently. And people can't, you can't listen to everybody's story. You know what I mean? It's just that'd take too long. Yep. But I think that's bullshit. Everybody has a story, and everybody's situation is different, and circumstances, in my opinion, play a big part in what's right and wrong. Right. You know what I mean? Right. I really don't believe in that whole war of right and wrong. To me, it comes down to circumstances, like murder, It can
be relative.
It comes to circumstance. Exactly. If you come home and someone's raping your wife, is it bad to kill that person? You know what I mean? Or they got your family tied up. Is it bad to kill that person? Not at all.
Not in my world.
No way. Aim small and miss small.
No.
But on other situations, it can be completely wicked.
Right.
But wilderness program, they're really policy.
You just didn't fit into their preconceived notions of what you ought to be, even though you're likely doing it better than they were.
Well, they would get jealous that these kids would listen to me and looked up to me. Right. To the point when they graduate their program, they would go back to their detention officer. And I can only imagine, because I'd only get phone calls from the DT officers, you know what I mean? Or they would call my boss and bitch to my boss that, who the fuck is this Grizz guy?
Talking about
telling this dude that marijuana, and one of them, to be so specific, there's this kid, right? And I met him because of my military background. I think that they started putting me on like backup. So when there was an escalation in a group, I'd get called out and I'd have to go and take over, de-escalate, whatever. And this one kid, one time, really smart kid. Dude, I mean, he did his homework like it was a joke. I mean, and I knew right away, just, this is why the kid's in trouble. He's just
bored or
something.
Yeah,
he's not being challenged on his level, but he's being put in the same bracket as everybody else's age. And it's like, dude, obviously this kid is well above his age. I mean, this kid was smart. He schooled and clowned the instructors on the information. Like, no, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. And I'd sit back and I was like, wow, this kid's really smart. So I had to walk with him, because he wouldn't walk with the rest of the group. So I got paired up with this kid, and we really started getting into some deep stuff, and I just opened up to him. Right. It's the only way to get these kids to open up to you, open up to them. So I started telling him my life.
Trust begets
this
trust.
Guy started looking at me like, dude, you're a cool person, you know what I mean? You're not a square like all these other, and that's the problem, is these staff member, they drink heavily and party, or some of them even smoked a little pot, you know what I mean, on their off time or whatever. But here they are with these kids acting like they're just like on this cloud and they've never done anything bad, and don't do that, and they're just like, they become police officers. And unfortunately nowadays nobody really likes police officers, which is kind of sad, because they're doing a job just like anybody else, and they got to deal with a lot of fucked up people. But then again, you give anybody power and they run with it, and there's a lot of fucked up cops out there, But I still try to teach my children to respect officers, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to badmouth officers, but I also let them know, hey, those officers have the right to really screw with your life. Right. They've been given this authority somehow, and they can really, what happened to the peace officer? Now they won't even help you break into your own car, you know what I mean? Like, got your keys locked in, but... Anyways.
With the kid in the back.
Yeah, we're not talking.
Help me out.
Help me out. Help, kid. It's policy. Yeah. You're like, what? It's a policy thing. We really need to start thinking about this policy crap.
Let's use our common sense here if we can, please.
Serious. I think we're losing that.
Yeah.
At an exponential rate.
That's also relative. I had that conversation with a friend recently. Like, wherever you're coming from, your common sense can differ.
Oh, I mean, relativity is a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that Einstein that proved that shit?
That guy.
I'm not a smart person, but I think that crazy-haired guy is the one who did that.
So you had a lot of wilderness experience.
I have more wilderness experience in my life than any other experience. I was raised, my dad's an Eagle Scout, was a scoutmaster my whole life. I grew up putting up those little shelter halves from the military pup tents, and tying knots and, all kinds of stuff. And
just immersing yourself in that world. And
playing
kind of
war, playing, capture the flag, growing up in the mountains. We've always lived near foothills of mountains,
That's what's beautiful about Utah.
I didn't grow up in Utah.
Oh, yeah, that's
I
right.
grew up in
Southern California.
Yeah, Southern Cal. But,
so you're in Provo, you're in the canyon, you think maybe I'll be out here for 2 days, maybe...
No, I wasn't in Provo. No, I was up in the Uintah Mountains. I didn't know where I was.
Okay.
You're talking about my walkabout. Yeah, we're kind of jumping around, but yeah.
The walkabout.
So I had already been working in a wilderness program, and that's kind of where I learned how to do fire by friction and a lot of the basics of primitive skills, but really got to hone them in and develop them while on your own,
Right.
I'm a fire master. I've started fire pretty much everywhere. every way you can think of.
Yeah.
And that's pretty bold saying that, because they're still thinking of ways of doing it, and I haven't been playing that game for a while, been doing the homestead and trying to set my land up on a self-reliant, self-sufficient level, using permaculture and stuff. But even that's hard to do with laws, county code, all that crap that violates our civil liberties and rights of pursuing the American dream,
Right.
And I refuse to be sleeping to enjoy that dream. So I have a lot of resistance with the local. Well, it seems to be on a low. Had every cop in my local town show up at the building department surrounding us, all because I said the F word in front of the building inspector. It's like, wait a sec, I can't,
Right.
I can't say. Well, he's threatening, him telling me I had to move off my own land, that I was living on my land illegally. That's threatening. You know what I mean?
Right.
I say an F word, and all of a sudden, fucking red panic. Oh, shit, red button.
Yeah.
I'm like, now we're waiting for the cops. You know what I mean? You're taking the resources of this town away from... Dude, somebody could have robbed the bank at that time, and there would have been nobody to do anything. You know what I mean?
Just dealing with Grizz at the...
Dealing with Grizz, yeah. And I was there with $2,700 to go through with my building permit.
Yeah.
And then they want to start pushing my butt. Oh, you're living on your land illegally. It's like, dude...
I'm homesteading in
I'm
the
homesteading,
wilderness.
in the wilderness. I've delivered both my children on our land. You know what I mean? Without power, without running water.
Right.
And now now they're at ages where, tubbies would be nice.
Yeah.
I want to get a little bit sophisticated, get some power dropped. But the funny thing is they would have dropped power on my land for my animals, so I could have a well, so my animals could have water, but not for my family.
What was the logic?
Basically, I had to move off the land, and they would drop power so that I could get a well for my animals. But that we're living on the land illegally because there's no permitted structure. And, when you challenge me, I really dig deep,
Right.
You know what I mean? And I started looking up all the laws and stuff when they first started citing us. And I was like, this has got to be, I understand homesteading,
Right.
like squatting, like Alaska, and how that's illegal in California. You know what I mean? You can't just go find land, squat on it, improve the land for 7 years, and claim it. But when you own the land, and you live in a rural county, nobody picks my garbage up at the end of my road, my dirt road. Nobody
Right.
drops my mail off at a mailbox that I could put up real easy. No, I have all these other things. I got to drive 2 hours just to go to a normal store. And you want to hold all these codes that were initially put in place because of Babylon and people living too close to each other. You know what I mean? Where...
Right.
My house catches on fire, it's going to burn your house down. I don't even see my neighbors, you know what I mean? And they're going to try to hold me to all these codes. Well, I found a section in there that Jerry Brown wrote back in the 80s, saying that if you live in a rural county and you own your own land, you have the right to build your own home and pertinent structures without the prejudice of the local building department.
Right.
Okay? And I presented this to them that day that all this fiasco was going down. This guy actually said, oh, we choose not to adopt that ordinance. And I was like, excuse me? So you're taking it upon yourself to choose to ignore a law that was written to protect 85% of the residents in the jurisdiction which you represent? I was like, so you're playing God, basically. You just going to make this up and you're going to tell me I told him, as I asked him, I said, so you're telling me that it's safer for my family to move off my land? And this is this is when like the whole housing market crisis thing was happening. And I mean, they're homeless. People were moving out of their homes and starting like homeless communities in urban areas and stuff. And I'm like, so you're telling me it'll be safer for my family to just move into one of these like homeless community things at the local park or something than to live on my own land. As my wife's like, you're ridiculous. And we were just like basically telling this building inspector,
you're pointing out the hypocrisy and
our opinion of him, and in front of all his co-workers and everything. And then the cops started rolling in and surrounding me, and they wouldn't let Paula get her, you know.
To be fair to the people listening to this, Grizz does not look like your average citizen. He's got dreads. He'll often wear the garb of the land.
I wear buckskins.
Yeah, buckskin, kind of like
brain
mountain
tan
man stuff. And it's just kind of honoring the lifestyle through also just embodying
I've worn a loincloth for a long time in Utah. Yeah, I've just, basically since coming out of the wilderness, it looked like I literally stepped out of a time machine from the past.
Like stepping out of a Smithsonian exhibit.
Yeah, kind of. I kind of look like that
City.
caveman in the Smithsonian exhibit, striking fire, making arrowheads. It's kind of like that. That's pretty much me, if you want to visualize something. But I rock it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a sexy bitch under all this.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah.
That's why I got such a beautiful
I don't
wife.
doubt that.
The one time I shaved my beard, for fishing.
Yeah.
Fishing for women.
Yeah.
That's my undercover, If I walked around shaved, I'd have a lot of women hitting on me. But
Yeah. Gotta do the beard thing.
You look like the caddy boy from was it Happy Gilmore?
Yep.
Women don't really flock to you as much.
As you're bathing in a pond on a golf course.
Nice. There's nothing wrong with that. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that. But yeah, now I'm kind of, leathers can get a little hot, so I found a style that I'm comfortable with, and it's pretty much like the garb of like the 18th century.
Yeah. Kind of for this type of work, horse.
It's good working, you know what I mean? My leathers, they get stiff from sweating in them all the time, and
probably smelly.
Got to re-stretch them out. No, they not so much smelly.
Jim Morrison, they said that he wore like the same pair of leather pants just continually until they just kind of wore out, and then he went to a store.
Oh yeah,
got another one. He just dropped.
I'm not wearing my shorts right now because I've had to modify them a couple times. In the wilderness program, some of my bosses came to me and wanted to almost put me in a dress code. Because
you're too wildery.
Well,
right
no, it's not that we're too wildery. It was the bagginess of my shorts around my leg. Because I don't like chafing, wearing leather. Well, they do these. You'd have to sit in group every night and every morning and talk about your feelings, checks, and goals. And if you were sitting across the circle from me, you had a full line of sight of my junk.
Yeah.
So... And nobody ever said anything to me until the field director came out one time and we had a group, and he sat across from me and he looked at my balls the whole time, and afterwards he's like, hey, we're going to need you to like put on a normal pair of pants and shirt. And I said, yeah, no, I quit.
So you're still in the Marines, but you had like the leather garb and you were already...
Well, by the time I was wearing leathers, I mean, I might have technically been still in the Marines. I hadn't gotten my other than honorable discharge.
Right. This would have been post.
So I was still AWOL at this point.
Right. Was it a technicality? I mean, were they like hunting for you? They're searching for you? They're warrants out for your arrest?
No, I'm not that important.
Right.
My friends that I was stationed with, they would stop by my parents' house and, try to probe. But my parents didn't know any more than they did.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they might get a phone call from me when I was in the wilderness program. I was out working 6 days at a time, and then I'd, was it 8 days on, 6 days off? Is that schedule?
Not a bad work schedule.
Yeah, so you go camping for 8 days and you have 6 days off to enjoy your paycheck. It was great, you know. A lot of times we'd go, you know, we'd staff up and we'd go to like national parks and go hiking other places where we didn't have kids to deal with. So for the most part, I mean, I was living in the wilderness at that time as well. You know what I mean? I didn't have a house. You know, I slept wherever I ended up when the sun went down. Right. You know, that was my pickup line when girls asked me, "Where are you from?" I was like, "Wherever I end up when the sun goes down." You know, it worked a few times, but so I mean, yeah, I was living in the bush with kids, and then I'd get out and I'd
just go out and do it.
I'd have to go have fun with my friends, you know, or friends that I met out there in the wilderness program. But
did you ever have any times when you're out there? I'm still kind of tracking down the initial story where you got dropped off in the Uintahs. Were there times where you like ever go out far enough where you like ran out of your staples and had to start hunting? Ever anything at that level?
I had to take down a deer for that first winter.
Okay, so you stayed out there for how long?
That was you know. Over a year.
Really?
You know?
On walkabout over a year when you had a backpack for a weekend.
And it was off and on. I came out a couple times. Just, I don't know why. Maybe just to see people.
Am I missing anything?
You know what I mean?
Am I still alive? Like, is my mind still intact?
It's crazy to think about it. You know, I haven't thought about this stuff in a long time.
But
you know, it's just a very powerful time in my life of self-recognizing and almost like my own rite of passage into manhood. You know what I mean? Like, I was a Marine, but you know, as a Marine, you do what you're told.
Yeah.
You know, you condition and you do what you're told. And this was the first time in my whole life where I was completely in charge and freed up
and doing what
you know. It's really hard to talk about. I mean, we could talk about, you know, what the day-to-day sequences are, but I mean, that shit's been played out so much in this last decade with Survivor Man and Bear Grylls and you know, all these people, you know, are doing it. I remember when Survivor first came out, my aunt, rest in peace, she was just begging me to just fill out the paperwork.
When did you get him out there?
That I would win this thing, and because I was already doing it, you know what I mean? And my mom was just, you know, my mom was, at first, she, you know, couldn't get past the smell, but she became proud of me. She, you know, you could tell she'd talk about her mountain man son, you know, but I've always just questioned the programming of society and what, you know, I mean, like, all the way down to, like, you know, childbirth, you know. Right. My first daughter delivered in a trailer park.
Right.
I was like 21 years old, you know. And even though we had seen a midwife, you know, during it, you know, the midwife didn't show up. And, you know, life goes on.
Right.
It was on me. But it was on me from the very beginning. Right. You know? Someone asked me, what are you going to do? And I was like, just, like, small talk. And they're like, what are you going to do? You know, because we're just like, oh, we're pregnant. I was like, what'd they do 1,000 years ago? I was like, I'll deliver it.
Do that.
I'll deliver it. You know, some cocky little 21-year-old. I was like, I'll deliver it. But, you know, I'm confident. You know what I mean? I'm confident in...
I mean, it's in our DNA.
Yeah,
it's like in our nature to know
totally
what needs to happen.
I mean, people just ignore that. You know what I mean? And
well, people aren't at a level where they can like even begin to hear that.
Which is ironic because how many people believe in like God and you know, some higher being? You know what I'm saying? And like, especially with the Christianity, you know, it's like that whole thing of, you know, there's only one God and He created all things, and basically just like what Christians believe in. You would think that more people would be self-empowered like this, just putting it into God's hands.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I could say, I delivered my children at home because if God wants me to have these children, I'll have these children. You know what I mean? That's not.
Right.
I'm just saying facetiously,
right.
like, as a Christian person believing in this Almighty, why wouldn't you have more faith that you know what I mean? We're just so conditioned to, like, question that, you know what I mean? And in everything we do, you know what I mean? It's like, all the way down to our medical, practices. So the fact that we still use hydrogen peroxide in first aid is ridiculous. Why people haven't been turned on to colloidal silver in, you know what I mean? Like
Manuka honey, that sort of stuff.
I don't know. I've never heard of Manuka honey. Is that a...
It's from New Zealand.
You put that on a burn?
It's from
I bet
New
you
Zealand.
could.
It's just from a specific plant that bees harvest the pollen from, and it has all sorts of like antimicrobial properties.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just a honey.
I mean, most honey does.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's some honey out there that make you feel high. You know what I mean? But we still question that.
Right.
In modern day, we question that. We feel that man can make better medicine in a lab with a, trench coat on,
Right.
than what they believe their God created for them. You know what I mean? And it's like, dude, everything that we need is right here on this earth.
I understand their argument, though. Like, well, God created our consciousness, and our consciousness, if we put it towards like eradicating polio, I mean, I see both sides, and I think there's value both. Okay, so like
keep going with this.
If they say, okay, well, our consciousness and what we are, like that's an extension of what God created. So it's up to us to like focus our consciousness on God's plan, and maybe for some of the humanitarian-minded, medical-minded people, medically trained people, that's ending polio with the vaccine. And that, I mean, if everything truly is from God and that's your, way of looking at the world, then what comes out of us is
I think we're all confused about what God is.
I think it's a word to describe, like, transcendent and also, like, gratitude. Like, when some crazy coincidence happens that the probabilities are, like, astronomical, that it ever, like, come together like that.
I
People
wonder,
are like, that had to happen for, like, a specific reason.
Right.
And you're like, that's God. I mean,
I wonder if the first man who saw the first space captain come down, if they were like, God!
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, so I don't know. I think everybody's arguing about a misunderstanding interpretation of...
Well, some people hold on to, like, the literal...
what creation was,
right.
And where it came from. And, but I kind of like to think that, without the missing knowledge, we'd be a lot like the Adamu, which were created by the Anunnaki, if my history's correct. Like I said, I'm not a very smart person, but I've heard a lot of things.
You're wise.
I guess, I don't know. Very sage. The story about the Anunnaki and the Adamu, which translates to Adam, which could be the whole like misinterpretation of what Adam is, and I don't know how people can think Adam was like the first man on earth when it's all in the book of Genesis. I mean, I'm just talking from the Bible. Before it talks about Adam and Eve, it talks about how there's multiple gods in the beginning of Genesis, how they created the firmament and the heavens and the earth, and created man and women to propagate the earth. Right. You know what I mean? And then it goes on, it might have even been in the second chapter or just later on in that first chapter, then it talks about how God created Adam to like name all the animals and stuff, you know? So it's like...
to subdue
and it's like I told somebody one time, I was like, dude, if Adam and Eve are the first on earth, I was like, what about Sodom and Gomorrah? Yeah. I mean, there was already like there was already like the profession of whores going on when Adam was around. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
In my opinion, the way I read it and translate it. But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast.
It all comes down. I think a lot of these like religious texts, just all metaphor and mythology, as Joseph Campbell would say. He's like a comparative mythology scholar. These all come out of our own biology. Like these stories, like evoke certain aspects of human nature, and a lot of these stories are meant to either like guide us along our path to like aligning your ego with your true self, like your soul, like you said, aligning things together. Like that's what a lot of these stories are for. They're like guidepost type signs.
Yeah.
That's one interpretation of it. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, you know, walkabouts, they're an important thing for a man, and even women. It has nothing to do with the gender of it all, but especially nowadays with as much crap that's going on and censorship, you know, misdirected information. It just seems like there's a lot of knowledge out there that's being held from us, and there's a lot of ideas and agendas that are posing themselves upon our future generations, that I would think that walkabouts would be a needed thing for people. You know, I would encourage more people to get out and just maybe even just doing a solo. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even want to use the word walkabout because I'm not Abo and I'm not from over there. You know, same thing with, you know, I really love the Native American culture. That's one thing I did. A profound experience that I had while out there in the Uintah Mountains is like I came across what, in my opinion, a true medicine man who lived out there, and he was, in my opinion, the guardian of those mountains. And he lived out there. There wasn't one thing synthetic on his person. Everything he had, from the buckskins to the bark baskets, you know, the ground pads, he lived in a lean-to structure. I mean, when he finally brought me to his little camp, like, this guy had watched me for like 3 months.
Just watch you, what's this white boy doing?
Yeah, cussing and, you know what I mean? Like, I'm out there just growling and screaming like a bear because, you know, whatever. Just
get it out.
I smack my hand or, you know, there's this one thing about being out there alone is you can actually, you know, get that out there, you know, and you know, there's times when I was trying to push down trees, you know what I mean? A nice standing dead tree.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have a chainsaw, you know what I mean? I really didn't. I had a hatchet. I didn't bring an axe, but you know,
if you can push it down, you might as well.
Yeah, I was
might
just
as well do that.
I was just sitting there pushing on it, and grunting and screaming, and you know, who knows what he actually saw and experienced. But I thought I was completely alone. And
did he approach you?
Yeah, it was after a really bad storm, and I was out making some adjustments on my thatching that I had done for my walls, and I'm down on my knees kind of dinging out another footing, and a little drainage area was kind of coming back into my home, and out of nowhere there's a pair of moccasins like in my peripheral, and I kind of like fell back to my hand and looked up at him, and he just turned around and walked away. And I was just like, no. I was just like...
Did you question yourself? Were you like, was that an apparition?
It was such a long time ago. I was just kind of like... I knew I had this feeling of like, okay, I'm not alone.
Right.
and for some reason there's another feeling inside of my mind. It was like almost like, okay, this is the end of my trip. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like this guy's come to like tell me I'm in a illegal place or something. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't, because I was still in that, like, you know, society mode. You know what I mean? I didn't think this was another guy out there like me that was just actually performing a duty, you know. But yeah, it was almost kind of like a ranger just came to tell you to clean up your fucking camp or something. And I was, you know, so I remember having those feelings. But it was there wasn't too much communication between us. Yeah, there's just that language barrier. Or maybe he didn't want it.
Or he didn't want to.
Yeah, there's a couple times, you know, I got words out of him. But for the most time...
Dummy.
Yeah, for the most part, it was just, you know, we were in the wilderness. And do you need words at that point?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You really don't. I mean, it's kind of weird to explain, but, you know, when you're on that level, it's almost like we were speaking the nature language, you know. I mean, when somebody points to a bush, you know what I mean, or peels the fiber off the fucking, you know what I mean. So he showed me a lot of things to use out there. He really helped me because you know I like to think that I had my shit together, but you know there were some areas where I really needed to, you know, focus on, you know, for one, a good sugar source. You know what I mean. And fibers. I wasn't familiar with the fibers around there, and you know,
like root.
Most people know of the common berries, but there's a lot of berries out there that are edible that, you know,
you just would have never had.
Well, I mean,
knowledge of.
They teach you, you know, fucking different little rhymes and shit about, you know, not eating certain colored berries. You know,
can you like
red is dead and.
Can you watch deer and like birds? Is that a good way to?
Most of my time was sitting watching animals.
Okay.
And when it came down to me feeling like I could spear a deer, I went on that path, and it was fun. It was like the child in me, you know. It was almost like playing capture the flag with your friends. You know what I mean? Yeah. A lot of stealthy, but looking back at it, you know, I was playing, and as close as I got to those animals, they'd always sense me before I got close enough, and they literally just for probably 2.5 weeks, I followed them in a big circle.
Here comes this Joker again.
And and honestly, this is probably when things really started shifting for me on that conscious living out there. I was really upset, you know. I'm like pretty much feeling like I'm not going to get this, and what am I going to eat? Right. You know what I mean? For the most part. And something just told me to stop following them and just let them come to you, you know. Kind of like hunters when they sit up in a tree stand, you know. But I didn't hunt. I wasn't a kid my dad was in the Boy Scouts. We were into tying knots and shit. My dad never had a gun, you know what I mean? So I didn't, you know, my gun experience came from shooting with my Scoutmasters and stuff like that. So as a kid, I never went hunting. So I mean, you know, I'm truly developing this as I'm out there, you know. And pretty much decided that I was going to climb a tree, a scrub oak tree, on this hillside where they normally would bed down in the afternoon. And I spent time sharpening a nice spear with my buck knife. I thought about tying my knife to the spear, but
plan
the
to go through.
The thought was, what if it sticks in there and then
you lose it?
I lose my knife in the fucking deer and it runs off. And so, there's a lot of that thing. And this is crazy. I haven't thought about this stuff in a long time. But, yeah, so I climbed this tree that, had an obvious bedding down in it. And that was another thing. It was like picking the tree. Which one do I climb? It's kind of like Russian roulette. You're like, are they going to land under this one again?
Or over there?
You know what I mean? I mean, they're going to land under a lot of them. They spread out, but, it's like which one, But I sat up there and I was pretty much standing on two branches with my back up against the tree because I was up there for probably a good 45 minutes. Spied on them from the ridge, so I knew they were out there grazing. And then they'd come down and usually hit their little water hole, and then start working their way back up onto that ridge, and then bed down in the heat of the day. And this mother and child came up and got under mine, and I almost called it off at that point because it was, I was like, oh man, but. I don't know. I've always believed that everything happens for a reason, and I really didn't want to jump on the back of a buck with those horns.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I pretty much kind of just leaned forward and fell out of the tree,
holding the spear and just
holding the
dropping
spear
on it.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to land on the. I wasn't trying to hurt my nuts or nothing.
Yeah.
So it was more of pretty much I just kind of dropped out like this and was trying to stick it between the shoulder blades, and I was going to land on the side of it. Okay. You know what I mean? And it pretty much all happened kind of the way I didn't quite hit it where I needed to, but those sounds still echo in my head, and I'm still not a hunter. Like I have no problem killing deer or gutting anything. That's not, as you can see with all my animals, I have no need to go kill nature's animals, so I raise my own food. But before I got this land, living out here, living on other people's farms, helped.
That's up close and personal, especially when you're doing it.
I cried like a little bitch, dude.
Absolutely.
The sounds that came out of this deer were just. I'm not even gonna try to repeat them, but dude, it was horrible, man. And I basically remember pulling out. I had a disc oil knife that I'd have in my cargo pockets, and it's pretty much a disc oil knife is like one pressure flake off of a cobblestone or something. Okay. It's because that first initial blow is going to send a shard off that has the sharpest edge you'll get. Okay. Whether it's obsidian
that you would have made out there.
This is one I made out there, yeah. Okay. And I used it for, scoring notches in my fireboard, and just it was a tool, but. I don't know where my knife was at the time. I don't know if I had it on me or if I should have it on me, but I don't know. I grabbed my disc oil knife, and I remember just holding the mouth, trying to shut this deer up because it was
stop it,
dude. Seriously, and I was just sawing away at the neck,
and you're literally,
and now it's gurgling and blood everywhere. I mean, it was just
on the inside you're panicking because it's making all this noise. But you've got it.
I mean, I wouldn't say panic. Like I said, I definitely, after this thing I took the spirit from this thing. I sat for 30 minutes by its body and apologized in tears. I felt like a shitty person for doing that, and...
you were providing for yourself. And if
I had to do it, It made a lot of jerky. But
not many people spear an animal. That's
no, I was telling somebody about it. one of my primitive colleagues.
Yeah.
And they say, yeah, that sounds like Tom Brown. I think it's Tom Brown. He's another survival.
Okay.
Has a few books out there, author.
All right.
And apparently I think he's done something similar. And has written about it.
Right.
Like I said, I pride myself on, people might be laughing when they hear this shit, but I pride myself that I have not read a book cover to cover in my life. You know, I always cheated on the fucking book reports. You know, my parents were teachers. I'd find the Cliff Note book in my dad's office, and I'd cheat and I'd find it. I just never had. And I can read. It's not like I'm illiterate. I just
rather
I don't have
live it
time. I'd rather just go do it than read about it. But
That's
I got a lot of identification guides. I like,
Right.
I like knowledgeable
Knowing
things like
what's-
that. But when it comes to like stories and other people's like whatever metaphysical, a lot of people, they hear my story and they'll be like, "Oh, you should read this book," or "This book sounds just like that." And in fact, it was funny because when I was in jail, got locked up for some basically petty bullshit, and got locked up because of the Patriot Act, because they had no evidence against me. Basically, they just profiled me and assumed that I was doing something that they thought I was.
Such an Orwellian piece of legislation.
Yes, seriously, retarded. So anyways, I sat in jail for a month for something I didn't do. With murderers and rapists and pimps and a bunch of degenerates. And it was just funny at night when the lights went down how these people would read from the Bible and the Book of Enoch. And I just couldn't take it anymore. Like I said, I was raised, Mormon, to believe in Jesus and all that stuff.
Devout.
And I was excommunicated. I wanted to serve a mission. But it wasn't until I was excommunicated that I was able to free myself up from, what I'd been taught. You know what I mean? Like, it's the hardest thing for anybody, I think, is to question the morals and lifestyle in which they were raised by a good family.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it was for the longest time. And it's not that I'm not a believer. I think there's way more to this story.
Gets in,
you know what I mean?
mysticals.
And I really I'm not a mystical type of person.
Okay.
I believe in magic. I believe in, forces that we can't see. But I don't believe that there's one being that created all things and knows all things. So anyways,
right. I'm with you.
saying that's basically, I had to speak up in jail. I was like, "Look, are you really?"
You start preaching?
Yeah, I started preaching. And they called
don't know.
They called it the Book of Grizz. They actually requested it every night when they started hearing the other guy reading from the Bible. They're like, "We want to hear more from the Book of Grizz." And I was like, "Really? All right." But it almost got to like comedy hour, because sometimes it can be comedy when you break it down on such. It's like I watched Netflix. I think it was Joe Rogan. Yeah. Yeah, it was like Joe Rogan when he's saying, if you told the story of Noah to a retarded kid, there's going to be a lot of questions, like
there's a hole in that story.
What happened to all the other ships? There was other ships around at that time. How come they didn't float? But anyways,
metaphors.
I just couldn't hear these people who were like, basically, they're in jail for murder, and now like all of a sudden you want to read from the Bible, like, I guess if you're a Christian, you just believe that Jesus was your Savior, and you're all good, brother. Stop reading. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it'd be like somebody reading over and over the Peter Pan story. You know what I mean? At one point, you just be like, you know what? Fucking enough. So I was just like, look, really, guys? You think that there's a white man up in the white clouds with a white beard who knows all, sees all, created all. And of course the black guys were like, why does he gotta be white? And I was like, all right, so you really think there's a black man up there with a black beard and the black clouds who knows all, sees all? They thought that was a little funnier. And I was like, I said, and this was kind of condescending because they're all prisoners in a cell. But I was like, when's the last time you guys seen the night sky? I was like, I know you're all locked up and shit, you know what I mean? But like, did you know that every one of those stars is a sun? That you can't even see the planets that are like evolving and rotating around that sun? Right. I was like, there's one living planet in our solar system around our sun. What if there's one? Are you telling me that there's
around every sun? Yeah. There might be.
So there could potentially be a living planet around every one of those stars. So for every star you see in the sky, there could literally be another living planet with different types of humanoid species, creatures, insects, consciousness, all that. Knowing that, just that simple fact, knowing that. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't believe that there's one being,
right,
or even like energy really, that created all that. There is an energy that might have created all that, but it's not like the same energy.
Not like
it's
a sentient being.
Yeah.
Let's see
what I mean?
Happens
like
when I do put this together.
Yeah, as far as like the Big Bang of a planet, okay,
right.
Whether or not that happens or not, and that is true, okay, but there wasn't a space captain that was orchestrating this fucking shit and created humanity, I believe we are genetically modified organisms. You know what I mean? It's proven in our blood. And the more we start studying our blood, the more they're going to start realizing.
What do you mean by genetically modified?
Exactly that. We are genetically modified organisms. We have been targeted, and our genes and our DNA has been mutated and targeted since the beginning. You know what I mean? And if there was a Noah's Ark that had two species of everything on the planet, it would have had to have been a DNA bank. You know what I mean? It would have had to have been in a DNA form. So if the story of Noah was really true, this guy's dealing with DNA. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's certainly.
But we don't want to think about that, because when we want to think about past times, we want to think of a dummy down culture, like we're still hitting shit with rocks and using copper tools. Right. And I don't believe in that. I believe that there was ancient civilization, ancient technologies that we still haven't been able to figure out. There's pyramids all over on so-called meridians of the Earth. If the Earth had meridians, which I believe it does, there's pyramids on like scattered throughout these meridians. You know what I mean? That we still don't know how. What I mean?
So ancient civilizations would have had some knowledge.
Ancient civilizations have genetically mutated our DNA for whatever purpose. I don't know. That could be philosophically discussed. Like I said, I don't claim to.
Right.
I'm just a conscious person, and I think on a. Anytime. Like I said, I don't surf the web on social media, don't do any of that stuff, but my wife, she does. She's connected. She beams off into Faceland. And I'm like, she comes back with all this information. And if it doesn't sound right to me, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, sorry, I'm just not I'm not gullible. I just don't I don't believe everything people tell me. If it doesn't make sense to me, usually I'm starting off not believing it. Like, you literally got to prove that shit to me for me to be like, take what you're saying. Because this shit does not even sound feasible. You know what I mean?
Well, some people will be saying that with this genetically modified.
Oh, yeah. And, whatever. They can believe in that shit. Right. But why else would we have fish gene in our blood, insect gene in our blood, monkey gene in our blood? You know what I mean? Like, the more they start studying DNA, the more they're going to start. They've already figured out. They have a gene in our DNA that's not in any other fucking animal, and they've called it PAR1. Now, if you were to ask me, this uneducated mind, I'd be like, that's the gene from our ancestors that fly around in spaceships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
because I didn't come from a monkey that came from an amoeba that slithered from the ocean.
You don't believe in evolution?
No, not in that term. Okay. I believe in evolution. Evolution's real. I watch evolution. I've watched ladybugs transform in my lifetime. I've watched certain bees. Yeah. You know what I mean? I've seen evolution in my lifetime, so I believe in evolution. Yeah. I don't believe that we came from. You know what I mean? I believe that if our genetic ancestor, if it dates back to whatever, Homo erectus, or, you know what I mean, a Neanderthal, that our genes were manipulated. It's just like cloning a plant. Right. And some people want to listen to this and be like, whoa, that sounds like real scientific. But basically, you cut the frickin' node off of a plant, and you plant it. You can even put it in your mouth for a little saliva and stick it in soil and water it, and you will have another plant genetically identical to the one you cut it off of. Very simple, okay? To a space traveler, cloning a human being is like putting a seed in a little pot and watering it. You know what I mean? It is not... We can do it right now. We still haven't figured out how to space travel. So that should just put you in perspective. If they're figured out how to space travel, they know how to clone humans and DNA and all that kind of stuff. You know, we're doing it right now. We've got a Smithsonian Institute based off of genetically modified organisms, and they've got a stuffed goat in there that's been genetically modified with spiderweb genes so that the milk contains these spiderweb silks that are equivalent to Kevlar.
Wow. I've not heard
if that's not some alien technology, people need to put themselves out of the
Matrix.
The Matrix for a minute and start really thinking on a logical level. Just like when you start looking at anything on an ancient technology basis or petroglyphs or any of these pyramids or anything like this, or even down to aliens, you know what I mean? Like, or God, any of that. When we talked in the beginning, it was like, I wonder if the first people who saw Space Captain come down, if they called it God. Or if he had to come and help them out a few times. And
we know they did. Like in Mesoamerica, when the Spaniards came, they called these conquistadors, they thought they were gods.
Well, and that should be a big example of how misunderstood humanity has been from the beginning. If they're going to call the Spaniards God and then get wiped away from them, right. How true is that word to this day? You know what I mean? Like, they were misunderstood back in that day. You know what I mean? And I tell you what, if I lived in that day and I seen a fiery vessel come from the sky and a man come out of it, motherfucker, he's God.
He's God.
I don't care. He could be... What's the Wahlberg guy's name? You know, he played in the Planet of the Apes.
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. There you go. That shows you how in the woods I am. I don't even know these stars these days. It could be Mark Wahlberg stepping out of this vessel. I'm going to call him God. Yeah. But in his world, he ain't God. He's taking orders from someone else.
He's an astronaut.
Yeah, he's an astronaut. Exactly. So, I mean, and who knows, dude? Who knows? I mean, I know at this point, you got to question if you see a spaceship in the sky. At this point in our technology, I wouldn't necessarily think it was a space alien. I wouldn't think it was aliens. I'd think it's our government playing around with ancient technologies that they're reverse engineered. You know what I mean? Maybe trying to stage an alien attack or some shit. I don't know. You know what I mean?
That could bring the whole world together.
That could make it. Yeah, it could bring the whole world together. Presidents have said this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be amazing if you just exposed aliens to the whole world. If we'd stop fighting amongst each other and come together on a.
For humanity has to have a shared common goal and a purpose.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but.
Feeding everyone would be a cool one. I don't know.
Feeding everyone. Well, that's what the One World Order is claiming. You know, they're going to end poverty, end hunger, end disease, end all this. And I'm like, how do you end all that without, like, a mass genocide? You're going to give everyone a car and a house and a haircut. And doesn't you know what I mean? Like, to me, that's just scary. Same thing when people say God's plan. I'm like, so there is an agenda? Yeah. Like... Wait a second, you know, because I tell you what, man, I love my children. And if I created children to inhabit an earth. Dude, I get on my kids for cleaning their room. This was another stand-up comedy. I don't know who did it, but I've heard it. It was like, if God came down, he'd be like, what the fuck did you do to this place? I left you this beautiful Eden of, luscious wilderness, and you guys just fucked it up. Don't you ever clean up after yourself? We're like, oh, you know what I mean? It's just like...
We don't know.
We don't know. We're not worthy. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's the truest thing that I could ever say is I don't know.
The truest thing anyone could say.
I really, it's like, especially with my friends and family and my own wife, I'm just like, I hate getting in these stupid conversations.
Circular conversations, really.
And almost turning into like argument because people want to hold on to their beliefs so strong even though they know shit. You know what I mean? And really, if you just humble yourself and be like, I really don't know. You know what I mean? It's like,
it becomes part of their identity and attaches to their ego. And like,
we all like to think we know
shit,
but we really don't. It's just, we're just living our life, and just hopefully you're living it the best you can. And that's all I'm trying to do. It's like, I live out here in the mountains because I can't relate with modern society these days. Like, really, it's like going to buy insurance and she's got to look at this screen and like
what
nobody.
The fuck are you talking
seriously,
about?
I feel like I'm dealing with stupid people when I'm out in society.
You're
I'm like
a robot.
Holy cow, and they want to look at me like I'm wearing weird shit.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at them like, what the fuck are they wearing?
You can't work in those clothes. What are you doing?
It's all about fashion,
feathers.
And I'm dig to fashion, but I don't know. I got called an Amish hippie the other day. And I was just like,
good combination.
I don't even know how those two go together. Especially when you look at my wardrobe, because my wardrobe is like not Amish or hippie. It's more like frontiers, fucking like I said. I mean, I dress more like the old gold prospecting miners, and
right,
or a pirate,
right.
But I was asked. I was like, why do you dress like this? Why? And I was just like, I mean, why should I allow modern fascism to dictate what I look like and how I live my life? Like my mom always said, she knows me better than anybody.
Right.
You were born 200 years too late. Well, why does it have to be too late? Why can't I just live now? Why can't I just get on my horse and go right off into the sunset and try to get lost in these big, wide open mountains?
Right.
When I'm out there, dude, it could be the year 1772. It could be whatever until that, motorcycle guy drives by me and I'm like, fuck you! You just ruined my dream! But
semi blows by.
Semi. No, I won't be out in the semi land, but nowadays people go out on motorcycles and four wheelers to go deer hunting.
Right.
Which I don't get it because that shit's loud.
Well, you're truly living like the American ideal of like freedom.
I don't know.
Pursuit of happiness, whatever that is.
There's a lot of people in this earth. A lot of people have their own. I mean, to some people,
everyone has their own idea.
Yeah, to some people, what you just said is living in a penthouse condo and high rise.
If you're programmed
drinking
to think
champagne,
those things are great. Then that's
I don't know. I've always felt like there's a shift that's going to happen in my lifetime.
A transition. I think people are speaking in those terms more frequently now than ever.
In my young days of being a nomad and just living off the desert, living in caves and shelters that I built all up and down Utah, and just living. I didn't, to me, I could live off nothing almost. I mean, when I'm in cities, and that's the thing about the desert, people look at the desert and are like, oh, lifeless. Man, there's so much life in the desert. So much. It's no question in my mind why the Anasazis, gathered to the Four Corners area, because it's just, I mean, I walk in that land and I hear flute music, you know. It just really brings, like, that. I'm not a Native American, but I am American Native, and I feel just so raw out there. Like I said, I've just walked that land in a loincloth. I remember one time I came out in the hurricane, Utah. Hurricane's what they call it. Hurricane. And they have this supermarket called Lynn's. And I'd walk around that town barefoot, shirtless, just wearing a loincloth. I mean, at first glance, you'd think I was naked, and then you're like, oh, there's a breechcloth there. And a few times, you know, cops would harass me, and, you know, times I'd be in grocery stores, and they'd come up and try to kick me out because I didn't have any shoes on. And I'd, like, one time I pulled off those clear produce bags and the zip ties, and I slid those over my feet and zip tied them around my ankles. I was like, there, I got shoes now. And
they're bothering me.
They're clear, you know. Can I get some food?
Yeah.
I remember one time I went to a homeless bank in St. George, Utah.
Doing some urban foraging.
To get some food. Yeah. These people would not let me in to get a food box because I had no shoes. I'm like, this is a homeless shelter food bank, right? Like, give me some shoes. Do you have any shoes? Like,
if you require me to,
I was like, really? I was like, they refused me to come in and grab a box of food and expired food and bread. Mm-hmm. And then they watched me go and dig through the garbage can to grab some, like, I found some cardboard, and they gave me tape. This is how ridiculous it was, dude. It was like, it was the last time I ever went to a food bank. I was like, how degrading do they make these people feel to get a little bit of help? You know what I mean? Like, up until that point, I was eating, like, rattlesnakes and cattail out of the river, you know what I mean? And, you know, berries and all kinds of shit. So
you think you're going to be eating good in town?
I go into the town and I'm like, oh, I'll go by the food bank, get some canned foods, and they wouldn't let me do that. And they watched me dig through the garbage can, get some cardboard. I asked them if they had any tape. They handed me tape and watched me make cardboard shoes for myself, and then they gave me a box. I was like,
all right,
wow,
whatever.
That's almost as good as, you know, treatment as we give our veterans.
Yeah. Speaking of veterans, we had a conversation on the Little Larrabee River that I'd like to get back into.
Who, me and you?
Yeah. When you were visiting, right?
Which one?
I think the first time I met you. We were just talking about, like, patriotism and veterans returning home from war, kind of like lost, and I just was kind of picking your brain on some of that stuff.
Well, hopefully California legalizes psilocybin mushrooms for medicinal use, and we can start, like, treating these people's PTSD and psyche with some real medicine, not these psychotropics that are making them play Russian roulette with their Bowie knife on their frickin' femurs. You know, my friend the other day was doing that. I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I just want to see if I'm still alive. I was like, I was all, hey, why don't you do that with a real knife? I mean, you probably bought the knife at Walmart. I was like, you did that with my knife, that shit would cut right through your jeans and stick into your bone, Ricky Bobby. Right. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? But, you know, these people are just, you know, they get fucked up out there, you know, and they have every reason to be fucked up. They did some fucked up shit. Right. We need to help them.
It's spiritual level maladies, essentially.
Yeah.
And I've seen out of the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, they've done research with MDMA, and, like, 2 therapy-assisted sessions with MDMA, 8-hour sessions, and they were able to reduce the rates of PTSD by, like, 83% of people. And then they'd do a follow-up a year later, and these people were still good. So there's absolutely something to this psychedelic.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So you've experienced psychedelics. How would it help someone who's, like, psychologically messed up?
Yeah. I can't say this is my disclaimer,
Right.
because everybody's
It's very
psyche is
personal.
different.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm not, like I said, I'm not an educated person. I don't have no PhD in anything. I've just done a lot of things in my life.
Right.
I've experienced it firsthand. You can read about shit all your life, but if you've never done it, you, in my opinion, you don't really know it.
Right.
You know? And basically, psychoactives intensify your thoughts, emotions, your feelings tenfold, you know? So, at first hand, if I were to hear using it for PTSD, people who are already having vivid hallucinations and, you know, trauma going on, you know, at first I would be like, dude, that would just put them into a bad trip.
Worse.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But this is what I'm going to say about psychoactives and psychedelic drugs in general, is time and place and setting. So yes, if you just walked up to a vet and gave him a hit of acid, you know,
Good luck.
at a 4th of July party, you know what I mean? Because, you know, you should be celebrating your freedom and liberty and independence. He could be having a good trip or a bad trip. He could hear those friggin' fireworks going off and feel like mortar rounds are going. Yeah, and he just has a flashback. That's because he was left alone. You know what I mean? Like, in those situations where you're talking about it, using it in a therapeutical setting, I feel that you really need a facilitator, an experienced person. It's kind of a lot like, for example, an ayahuasca ceremony.
The shaman.
A true one. When you go down to South America and you get it done by a shaman who's been making this stuff since they were 14.
Right.
You know what I mean? And facilitating a guided journey through your psyche.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you are going to come up and face all of that stuff. And that's the problem. It's not about masking it. It's not about hiding it. You know what I mean? Putting those images. It's about releasing it, moving through it. It's like coming up to that wall and hopping over it, or shattering it and breaking it down, you know? That's where they're going to release this stuff. If you hide it and put it in your footlocker, every once in a while it's just going to jump out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Just repressed.
It's repressed,
Yeah.
exactly. So
It has to come out.
It has to come out.
Your body's trying to heal itself.
And in that way, that's what those psychedelics are doing. They are filtering your psyche, and they're making you, and you don't even have to have PTSD. I mean, you could just have some skeletons in your closet and think you're all cool and you're going to have this, but ayahuasca will show you what you need to deal with. You know what I mean? That's what I believe. Psychologically,
and, like,
just
spiritually.
it could be in a vision. Right. You could straight be living it over. It's like I said, your mind's all different.
Right.
You know what I mean? I could smoke DMT and talk to avatars, you know what I mean,
right.
on Planet Kolob. Yeah. And someone else could smoke it and we become avatars and start talking. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know. It's
like the
psyche of a person is like,
what it knows.
You know, deep. You know what I mean? And
it's worth exploring.
Definitely.
But it is disorienting as well.
But one thing that I learned through my heavy usage as a kid is that it is sacred, and it is powerful, and that it should be used with the utmost respect and diligence. And you need to have intent about what it is. You know, yes, you can take these drugs on a recreational level and you can act like fools and giggle and think you had spiritual profound times. You know what I mean? And maybe you did have spiritual profound times, but it's all comes down to your intent and what it is you're trying to get out of it. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that spirit resonated really strong with me when I was a kid, and I had that one bad overdose.
Right. Just a bad trip on
a
LSD.
bad trip, which I never believed was even possible. People talk about bad trips, like, whatever, you're crazy, man. Like, I am the game master. Yeah. I felt like a supernatural on LSD, you know, but after getting the shit kicked out of me by 6 cops while tripping, you know, I lost myself physically and mentally and went spiraling into a really bad negative trip, you know. Ended up in the hospital, all kinds of shit.
Your psyche is trying to protect itself in those times and creating
and
new
shuts
boundaries,
down.
new barriers.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, it's like your body, I believe, really, it's so aware of even the future, your consciousness, that when something really bad is going to happen, I believe your body either dreams about it. Like, I've had premonitions, exactly, and it's your body's defense mechanism for helping you deal with that before the time actually happens. You know what I mean? So you can actually handle it better.
Right.
But yeah, psychedelics, man, are a very, very key element of who I am, and where and why I even think the way I think. And why I don't trust any government, why I don't trust authority and what people tell me, because it's like,
who told you that, right? Like, how do you know that? Did you experience that? Did someone tell you that was common sense? Is it?
To me, it's just like, dude, I mean, we can live our life listening and believing other people who are, I mean, truly, really don't even care about you. I mean, here's something to think about. Who in this world loves you more than anything?
Your mother and yourself.
Your mother and your father.
Yeah.
Okay? Beside yourself, the one people in this world that would love you unconditionally, theoretically, there are some shitty fucking parents out there, but theoretically, we love our children the most. You know, okay, the Christian would say God,
Jesus.
You know, whatever, okay. Well, even loving our children, we lie to them from the day they're born. We lie to them about whatever their programming reason of why we lie to them. But we lie to them about Santa Claus, we lie to them about the Easter Bunny, we lie to them about the Tooth Fairy, and in some people's opinions, we lie to them about God. You know what I mean? Because none of us really know. You know what I mean? But we're constantly lying to our kids, and we love them. I never have. I'm Grizzly Claus. Or Santa Grizz. Yeah. My kids know where their presents come from. They know where the dollar comes from when they pull their tooth out. My daughter walks up and hands me her tooth. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, as far as God and Jesus, the principles and all that stuff,
the morality
and the principles of Jesus and stuff, I don't disknock at all. Right. I want my children to be raised having a mind for their own. Okay? And like I said, if with as much shitty shit as going on in this world, if there is a fucking creator that created all of us and loves all of us, where the fuck are they?
Right.
Okay? And don't give me some metaphysical fucking spiritual fucking lesson bullshit you pulled out of a fucking book right. About, no. The fact is, if I was observing my children on a planet and they were all fighting, dude, I don't let my own children fight and pull hair, you know what I mean? When it gets to a point, I don't let my fucking chihuahuas get to a point. It gets escalated to a point and I'm like, enough, stop, you know what I mean? I break it the fuck up.
Right.
What, dude, seriously, from all the fucked up things in our world and our society, and from turmoil to sociopathic tendencies, where's the intervention here? You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean,
I
could start just throwing out like circumstances that would just curl your stomach. Like, oh man, some horrible shit that happens to good people on a daily basis. People who never deserved any of that stuff. You know what I mean? I like to believe in shit that's real. You know what I mean? So, in that day of all the trying to figure out, I probably would have, like, worshipped the king who cut the fucking thief's hand off. Yeah. Because to me that made more sense.